Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a video on Ripple grants, as you can see behind you here. um, this is going to be a video of some things that I feel like need to be addressed. This is hopefully going to be a constructive critique on Ripple, the grant system, and maybe some holes and gaps that need to be filled, as well as, yeah, much more that we'll be talking about here shortly. But some of the issues that we're going to discuss here today are going to be the lack of direct feedback, the lack of XRPL node funding, projects taking the money and running, which is obviously not good because that takes away from others that are doing great things. Apparently, Xumm is also blacklisting IP addresses as soon as there's any development requests that are made using it. And we also have an issue in the community that on top of this program, VC funding is kind of seemingly to be tied to the Ripple grants program and if the project has support from Ripple or not. But I've got some different perspectives on this today. And so I have here with me Julian from Swiss Tech, Dirk from Expectar, and Chris from BPM Wallet. They all have different perspectives coming to this conversation, and I believe it's going to be extremely valuable. I hope that you'll stick around. And of course, if you like this video, of course, always appreciate those of you who smash that like button. And I really think this is something the community needs to gather around, because the better grant program we have, the faster I think that the community can grow and good projects can come to the XRPL. So if I would just humbly request that you share this video and ask the question to your communities out there as well. So that being said, Julian, I guess we'll start with you. I want to give everyone about 2 minutes just to start with who they are and why they joined the conversation today.
Hi, my name is Julian. I'm the founder of Swiss Tech Token, and I used to produce tools, and I'm actively developing on the XRPL. And I was also submitting for 2 grants, wave 3 and 5, if I'm not wrong. And got also a bit frustrated after automated refusals. And after also discussing with other leaders, I came also to a point where I thought it's maybe important that we discuss together about what's happening. I was also happy to meet Chris in London in the awesome BPM event. And we were also able to discuss about nodes and what we should do. And yeah, that's why I'm here. And I think we have something important to discuss, and I think Ripple has some trust to restore if they're even able to do that. But yeah, I think there's something even weird ongoing. So yes, I'm there for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. Dirk, what about yourself?
Well, hi guys. I started Expectar, as most of you know, somewhere 16 months ago by now. We haven't had any help from anybody. I think we are a grassroots project. We have done very well, fully by the support of the community. We have 2 validators. One is on the UNL list. We have run a full history node. With several of our sales, NFTs, land sales, we crushed the volume on the XRP ledger. When we started with our NFT sales, for example, we had a 24-hour volume that was higher than the 50 biggest other projects combined. We have had a huge billboard on Times Square. We have a multi-chain approach, and I think that we have been doing lots of what we have done by the book, that we have set an example for lots of other projects, that we have a lot of community support. And one thing that we will be discussing today is the question whether what projects should get funding and how that procedure goes. To me, it's a riddle. We have applied a couple of times for the Creator Fund, multiple times for the grant program, and 2 times for the accelerator program. You never get feedback. I am very well aware of the amount of people that will apply, but it's very hard to get height of it. And I think it's really important even if it's not for ourselves, that we address these problems to make the procedure better, to help Ripple out, and to make sure that good projects get a push in the back and are able to build actual products which will bring more eyes to the ledger, more volume, and will benefit everybody building on it.
Gotcha. I appreciate that, Dirk. And just to clarify real quick, because the larger community may not be aware, there's the Ripple Grants program, and you mentioned another one. I just want to like give context to that too, because I want to make sure we're talking about two different things and that kind of thing. So
initially there was the Creator Fund, mostly focused on creators. I think more artists, NFT artists. I presume it still exists. The grant program is more focused on developers and actually people writing code and coming up with cool ideas using the XRP ledger. And then I think with the grants program, the amounts are somewhere from 10,000 up to 250,000 US. And then the accelerator program is a program that they recently started a couple of months ago. The first cohort you could get, if you were amongst the chosen ones, 50K. But more important, and I think way more important, is that they have some trajectory where they help projects get in touch with VCs, help projects building pitch decks, help people or founders doing pitches, and so on and so on. So I think from a business perspective, the amounts that are given in general, it might seem high to an individual. However, lots of people have no idea what it takes to build a product. I didn't have an idea when I started. I have a background in property development, not in software development. It costs a lot of money, a lot of time. It's very difficult to set fixed timelines because every time you ask a developer, when will it be done? Well, I use Wietse words, it will be done when it's done.
Yeah.
So very tricky business, you know, because it can take way longer than you expect it to be, and way longer means way more expensive. So the grants are a big push in the back for lots of people. However, if you speak about numbers, it isn't that much.
Yeah. So to elaborate on your point real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Chris for his intro. It's like, yes, when you think about $50,000, $70,000, these kinds of numbers, that's all fine and good. But just for, like it can cost around an average of $100,000, just for one developer paid full time. So if that puts things into perspective of you in this conversation of how many developers that might be needed over different projects or what have you, then hopefully that helps. But Chris, what's your experience and what's your take on the conversation as we join today, and let people know who you are?
Hi everyone. Then I'm Chris. I'm the CTO of BPM Wallet. We are a Wave 4 grantee. First and foremost, I'm a developer, 25 years now plus commercial experience with development. I love crypto, been in the space a long time now, and it's my passion is to build with blockchain. So that's what I'm doing. Join BPM because it solves a real problem. There was a genuine issue with event ticketing, and when it was pitched to me, the idea just made sense, and using blockchain does actually solve the problem. So the reason I agreed to join your call today to be part of this conversation is I obviously have a different perspective to Julian and to Dirk, and I just wanted to make sure that Ripple is represented appropriately from every angle of this. I totally understand the frustrations. May very well even be feeling those myself if we'd have been on the other side of the result. In my opinion, what Ripple do is important, and the last thing we want to do is for them to stop doing that. But I am a firm believer in trying to work within systems and improve them. So if all we can achieve at the end of this conversation is just a constructive conversation about how we can improve what's there for the betterment of everyone in the future, that's my goal. I'm not here to to overly criticize, but equally where criticism and constructive feedback is appropriate, I will give it. Our experience with the grant was okay. There are certainly areas that I think could be improved, and I will obviously look to try and share those as we go through, in the hope that some of those feedbacks will be taken into account, and we will end up ultimately with a better process for everybody going forward. I hope that's a common aim that we will all share today, as we all share our very different experiences of working with the grant process. On that, there's not much more I can add, other than, I look forward to a good spirited conversation and hear all the different sides of everyone's experiences, which I've heard, to be fair, multiple times from dozens of other projects, both successful and unsuccessful, and there's quite a lot to talk about. So thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you. I really do hope that this will be something that the community can rally around, and and that Ripple, hopefully somebody somewhere in the right places will hear this and think, hey, these are different things. And of course, transparency is key, right? You cannot fix a problem unless you know that it's there, or it's raised up enough to where it's getting to those right people. So that's the goal of this video. And if you're watching and that's you, hi. But that being said, I would love to be able to, as we address topics, make sure that we're giving not only the criticism that is, of course, maybe due, but the outcomes that we're looking for, as well as the things that can change to increase those good outcomes as we move forward. So with that being said, I want to make sure that we do get onto the topics that we have here. So Julian, I believe you mentioned the lack of direct feedback. I would like you to, since you kind of already brought that up, maybe we can start with you on that conversation.
Sure. Yeah, for me, that's one of the most difficult points. I mean, sorry. Making a submission, working for it, let's say during, just also close this here. Okay. Let's say we brainstorm it over a month to make our first submission, and you get an automatic answer where you have basically no reason why, and that's the first time we were like, okay, it's new for us. Maybe that's the way they go. Maybe we have just to apply another time. But it was already a feeling like, we are unworthy. I mean by that, we are not even worth a direct answer. Someone who would take just the time to explain us for this or that reason we didn't take you. So I think this automatic answer is first giving a feeling of being unworthy and not being chosen by Ripple or recognized for what you do. And then, yes, for sure, as soon you made a second submission where you again worked hard, where again you made a business plan, where again you made a brainstorming, trying to understand what was wrong the first time, and you get exactly the same automatic answer. It's a copy paste basically. And so I'm like, okay, it's like trying to get the driver license, and every time you fail, you don't know why, and you come back again and you don't know why you will fail, because no one tells you, hey, you're just missing this simple thing, or we will never award you because of that reason. So for me, I prefer getting an answer where it's like, Julian, we will never reward you because you don't use XRP, you use your own token, or there's another reason. I prefer having that and knowing there is no reason that I apply again because I got an answer. I know they want to award us, or maybe something saying you change those few points and we can discuss again. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's really, I mean, in the real life, when you have companies, when you engage with people, when you make, sorry for my English, a bilan, maybe a mid-contract detail for the worker. I mean, all those things are normal in the real life. Why you don't get a feedback there? It's serious business. There's a lot of money and time invested. And this way of non-answering, because an automatic answer is not an answer. It's an answer that is dropped like this. For me, it's really like unprofessional, and then comes the frustration that rises, and where you just like not even talking about nodes and things like that. It's just, Dirk said it before, it's not about the money, it's about the tap on the shoulder, that they recognize your effort, and even 10 grand would be enough for me. It's not the money, it's just the fact that you got acknowledged for what you do, and that the main company of your blockchain, it is recognizing your efforts. And after now, for me, 1.5 years of development, I cannot even quantify what I invested or the time it took me, and it's just insane. Dirk said it. Those costs, people don't imagine the costs that are engaged to build companies, to start things from scratch. And now we are at the point where, yes, we are building a hardware center, a data center, sorry, and the costs are huge, really huge. And then you realize there is no incentive to do nodes, and basically there is no incentive to run your project on that blockchain. You get no acknowledgement from nowhere. And yes, at some point, for me, the message is, guys, if you found another blockchain that is inviting you, that is offering you a grant and just discussing with you, basically, go ahead, leave. And that's for me really the hard thing, where I'm not the only one. We are so many projects. It's so much developers. It's so much money.
Hey,
It's
Julian,
so much time.
sorry to
And
interrupt.
I think
You're breaking up a little bit. While you're reconnecting signal wise, I want to also give Dirk and Chris a chance to address as well. So
yeah, sorry.
you're good. You'll have to forgive Julian. He got a little bit delayed, but he's persevering and joining us. So I really appreciate him. Dirk, what's your take on the lack of direct feedback?
I think there are several things that we have to keep in mind. I do get that giving grants is giving grants, that nobody is obliged to do it. So that's something that I'm well aware of. However, what are the metrics? What are the things that make something viable or not? If we are looking at your screen now, it's like really, well, it's not mathematics for sure. Huh? So it's really difficult to exactly know what they are looking for. I also think that regarding the feedback, I understand that Ripple can't give everybody detailed feedback because it would probably take too much time and too much effort. However, what Julian said is something that is interesting. You know, you are a team of developers, you are starting a business, you are investing money. It can be true that your idea, in which you believe in firmly, is not as good as you think it is. And then somebody should tell you, well, guys, for this and this reason, better stop it, because you're burning time, money, energy, and it will never happen. And that's okay. You can take a certain direction in life, believe in something, and fail for good reasons. However, if you get what Julian says, an automated feedback, you weren't selected, but feel free to apply again. Well, so we tried. We have, of course, Bob Way on board, who knows the XRP ledger quite well.
Yeah.
We have Neil, who has been a developer since he was 8 years old. Bob is more interested in the metaverse platform, which is actually a metaverse operating system that we're building. We will release some cool stuff, by the way, in the next few weeks, which has never been done by any project claiming to do something similar. So pretty unique. Tap on the shoulder by Epic Games, by the way. No money yet, but tap on the shoulder. Cool. Really encouraging. And then we have Neil building a platform which is which seems like it is an NFT marketplace, but is actually a crypto-enabled e-commerce platform where you can sell physical goods, digital assets, NFTs, tokens, where you can accept fiat, collaboration with Stripe, onboarding Web2 people without a crypto wallet, multiple chains integrated. Standalone marketplace will be launched very soon. The platform is also being used on Expector's native marketplace. It will be white labeled for other people to use. So it's quite a lot, you know. We have like over 50 people working for us full time. You can make a calculation yourself of development cost. And we have been very fortunate. We have been very, very lucky to have huge community support, really grassroots project, breaking almost every record on the XRPL in the past year, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, that helps. However, if you are building on the XRPL, and with what we are doing, our multi-chain approach may seem as we are leaving the XRPL or not that interested in the XRPL anymore, which is not the case at all. How do you think you can bring people to the XRPL? By reaching out to people on other chains, by making it easier to spend their money in a project that is building on the XRPL. I don't know. Am I the only one that sees that or not? I made some comments regarding the grants as well, which got a lot of traction. And I can't say how many people sent me private DMs on Twitter mostly, and not the least, big projects, OGs, people from the XRPL Foundation, people from everywhere that say, well, you're right, you're 100% right. And finally, somebody stands up and says it. However, we prefer not to do it because it could bring us in a difficult position.
Yep.
Again, we are burning quite a lot of money. We are actually building stuff. It takes time to build stuff. We have shown quite a lot. There will be way more. And I'm not really worried about me or Expector. And that's something that some people perceived it as the frustrated guy that thinks he deserves a tap on the shoulder and 50K or 200K. Well, wake up, people. 50K, 200K in what we are building or what Chris is building or what Julian is building is nothing, nothing. But children are happy when their parents say they are doing a good job. And that's very motivating. And people appreciate when their parents push them in the right direction because it will benefit the whole family. And that's something that I don't even want to use the word frustration. I'm a very passionate guy, and I think it's a pity. It's a pity for Ripple. It's a pity for every serious builder on the XRPL.
Nice.
And I think we should address it, and I'm very thankful that you give it a shot. I hope that people listen. I've been reaching out to lots of people at Ripple as well. Even people at Ripple send me DMs that I was right. But every time you try to set up some kind of direct communication, everybody says, well, it's not us, it's somebody else, but we don't know exactly who it is. So there is no way to do it in a decent way in private. So we have to try to do it in public.
Yep.
I try to make that happen with somebody that we all know that works for RippleX and is responsible for the direct line with the community. And as soon as I raised my voice by way of speaking and not literally, he blocked me on Twitter.
So you're saying that a guy that was responsible for the Ripple grants program, when you were trying to give that feedback, he blocked you?
Yep. I've made a tweet. Oh, and you know, in the grant or in the accelerator program, one of the interesting questions was, why are you a rock star? That was a question that they asked. Well, I am a rock star because I smoke 3 packets of cigarettes. I can sing better than John Bon Jovi, and I work 22 hours a day. That's what they want, no? That's what else do you want? Just don't raise your voice or don't make anything public. Don't make it appear that you are not really happy with some things, or they will shun you. It's like the Amish. If you want to speak up, you get shunned.
Well, I don't know about that about the Amish, but I'll you may have experiences I don't there. But when it comes to, you know, raising transparency, like again, that's what the whole conversation we have here today. I really appreciate you. It seems I'm getting a common thread here, but before I pull out those strings, I want to hear from Chris as well. Chris, what are your thoughts on the subject of the lack of direct feedback?
Well, before I go into my own experience with it, I can certainly say that I've had contacts from many projects that have expressed similar types of experiences. Many of them saying, what did you do different? You know, why were you successful and we weren't? You know, I've had all those kind of conversations. They're not easy to have. The truth is, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what we did differently. I don't know that we did. I really don't know. And it goes to the heart of the question about the feedback, because we applied in wave 4. So I think we were doing our preparations around the October, November timeline. So we got our application in. It was in a week or two before the deadline. And so we were waiting, probably 6 weeks. We heard absolutely nothing. And if you'd have asked me come sort of like the first week of December, you know, what's going on, I'd have said, oh, well, we're not gonna get anything. We've heard nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There were conversations going on within our team about what do you think it means. And I was just like, give it till the end of the month. If we haven't heard anything by early December, obviously we haven't won anything, and we'll just move on and carry on with our plans regardless. And then literally out of the blue, we just get an email through and it just says, you're shortlisted. And we're like, great, okay, what does that mean? And then
Right.
like 2 days later, we get another email to say we're in the final and please prepare a presentation. And they gave us a whole list of stuff that we had to then prepare in order to do effectively a Zoom call with Ripple, or I should say with RippleX. So there was a developer from RippleX, a couple of the members of the RippleX team, and members of the judging panel as well. And we did exactly what they requested. We put a humongous amount of time into preparing it all. They did not want anything pitchy. They didn't want a sales pitch. They wanted technical demonstrations.
Huh.
So I went to extreme lengths to sort of produce and showed them at code level, step through the code. This is what's happening. I felt a bit silly, really, considering, you know, many of the on the call were developers, and I'm walking them through code, which you would expect they knew. Anyway, I did everything that they asked, showed them all, and they said, that's great, thank you very much. Asked us a couple of questions which weren't particularly technical and said, okay, great, we'll let you know. And then we heard nothing for 2 hours, 3 hours, and then we had the email through to say we're successful. So we heard almost instantly. And it at the time, I said it felt strange that we went through this really long, protracted period of time and heard absolutely nothing. And then the whole thing was wrapped up effectively in a day. I do think that if you're lucky enough as sort of like someone that's applied to get shortlisted and make the final, it's for you to lose. I think if you're shortlisted as a finalist, you can pretty much say you've won. You've just got to not screw it up. So that's what we aim to do, is just to go on and demonstrate. They're a typical, Ripple are a typical corporate company. They're doing due diligence, which they've presumably got to do. And they just wanted to see the people involved, make sure that we had the credibility that we appeared to have on paper, asked us a few questions to confirm it all. And then it was genuinely just like almost like a confirmation from their side that they were happy. And then the grant was awarded. And then, of course, we had to keep quiet about it then for about a month. We couldn't tell anybody anything about it. And it's really difficult when other projects are sort of starting to get emails through to say that they had been rejected. I'm going on a space call and everyone's going, oh, we've been rejected. How about you, Chris? Have you heard anything yet? And I'm going, oh, no, I can't say that we've won. All I can do is just say, well, we haven't heard yet. So for weeks, I was saying, oh, we haven't heard. And then luckily, I was saved by Christmas because I had some time off and I didn't have to worry too much. And they announced very early January. So one bit of feedback for Ripple would be, you know, when you've awarded your awards, go to the announcements faster, because for the people that you've effectively gagged to not say anything, it's really difficult to be in that situation when other people are asking you those kind of questions. So when you've said that there's a lack of feedback, right, it's not, you're not limited just for people that are rejected. We had a significant lack of feedback through the entire process, and it literally, all the feedback we had came in a very short window, and then we were successful. So, you know, obviously my opinion of it all is different to Dirk and to Julian's, obviously, but nevertheless, you know, my own experience of it wasn't that far away. It was just the end result was the same. It was different. You know, we had very little information throughout the whole process. You know, we spent a huge amount of time filling in the application form, trying to work out what it was they wanted and making sure we got it right. And then we rolled the dice like everybody else. And for all I know, we just got lucky. I don't know, because they never told us. They never told us why they gave us the grant. They never said, we think your project is fantastic and here's why, and this is why we're going to support you. They just said we won.
Gotcha.
So when Dirk was talking about there's more to this than money, he's dead right. For us, when we applied, we said the money's not the most important thing to us. The vindication of having someone like Ripple X just say that they're supporting you in any way has huge value to us as a project. It's also great to know that they think you onto a winner as well. That in itself has value. And of course, we have had the ability, if we wanted to speak to developers from Ripple X, although I've only had course to do that for 15 minutes on one time, just to clarify something. But, you know, so there's a lot more to winning a grant than just the money. The money is always helpful, but I think Dirk is right. The amounts of money that are being given out, you can't build a company on these amounts of money. You know, for us, it's a few months of our burn rate. And it's a lack of education and a lack of understanding in the community that think because you've been awarded $200,000 that you're rich, and suddenly this project is going to go on and run itself for the next 2 years. And when you said a decent developer is 100K a year, and the rest, if you want senior, you know, 100, I mean, 60 to 80,000 pounds would be sort of like a middleweight developer. You'll usually have a few of those in a team. You're always going to have one or two senior developers. You're going to have a CTO, which is overseeing all of it. And you've got a whole raft of other people that are around the project supporting it as well. I mean, BPM is over a dozen staff now. We have to use some contractors to augment our team because we're always on that battle for raising funds to keep things churning. I mean, every project is in the same boat. If Ripple had give us $2 million, then that would have bought us a nice lengthy runway. We would have been able to have got to our end goal faster, delivered quicker. But hey, they give us enough money to do a very small piece of our overall roadmap. That's now being delivered.
Okay.
And you know, I want my feedback to be constructive. I'm very grateful for the support they gave us, but equally, if I can give feedback that helps improve the process for people in the future, then I would hope that's what comes out of everything I've got to say today.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
I have to say, JT, that I do want to say explicitly that I do think that lots of projects that got funding really deserve it. Amongst them, what Chris is doing with BPM. So you could argue, well, maybe what you're doing is not good enough. That could be the case, you know. However, with the platform, Neil did the Web3-a-thon at Consensus and got 50K from XDC community. We can't announce everything, but we are in very, very, very good contact with HBAR, of course, that we already have integrated. Hugo Fillion became a personal friend, and we are in good contact with their foundation. Algorand Foundation, Avalanche, everybody's interested in what we are doing, except the people on the chain we're building on.
It's so sad. I'm sorry.
No,
It's horrible. There's no word for it.
It becomes amusing in the end, you know. And I think that another thing that lots of people that don't get the grants, and I presume that Chris, since he's a very intelligent man, also has those same questions. However, they're not as acute for him. But if you look at the projects that actually get grants and what happens to them, are they commercially viable? Have they delivered something?
Yeah, that's a whole nother point we'll get to here in a second.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, so that's an important one regarding the feedback as well. Why this and why something else not? And that relates to Chris. He got it. So happy days. Congratulations. But why? That's also important.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question. That would actually have been useful information for us to know. Why did you give us the grant? Would have been a nice thing for us to have been told, for sure.
So to sum this up and tie it into a bow, one of the things I've taken down as we are discussing this and what would help the Ripple grants or any grant system is to be more data driven, to have more key leading indicators as to why a project should understand that it did or did not get the grant, in terms of listing things like having a rubric or a scorecard of some kind, so that, you know, if in that automated email it probably shouldn't be automated, because we know that this is part of the problem, but having a rubric to where you understand where you fell and maybe some areas to improve on, it would be helpful, as well as, you know, people not blocking you whenever you're trying to find out answers. It seems a very negative thing. I'll get to you one second, Chris. To be more visual with the process and understand where you are in it, having visual cues might be helpful. Directing feedback, so a direct feedback, like I talked about the rubric earlier, as well as announce faster. Just to sum up what I've heard so far, Chris, what are your thoughts?
I'm just going to say, I mean, I've been in business for a long time now. I've started my first business at 18. I've run many companies now, and I've tendered for many projects over the years. And a grant is different, yes, but it's very, very similar. And what I think would really help the people that are going to apply for a grant is, whenever you go through a tender process, you know, usually you're actually given some criteria that actually explains, you know, how they're going to sort of like look upon your proposal. So they will generally have some form of chart or graph which is actually explaining how they're going to make their decision. You know, and you can look at what it says on your screen now about what the judges are looking for, but there is no weighting around that. It is not possible for you to actually look at that and go, yeah, it's worth us applying, or no, it's not. I mean, you know, if you look at just one of those, for example, team expertise, okay, does that count for 5% of the overall weighting, the decision, or does it count for 25% of the overall decision? You know, just putting some simple numbers by the side of that, you know, how important is sustainability to RippleX in their decision? I mean, it's clearly something that they want to support. It's part of their whole, you know, a big thing that they push with the blockchain is the sustainability of the XRPL ledger. So is that really, really important to them in terms of their decision? So some kind of metric whereby projects can prejudge themselves in terms of their fitness to apply. You may look at it and you may go, you know what, on balance, we're probably best off not bothering, because we're just not going to tick the boxes and we can just save ourselves a whole heap of work. Then again, you know, you might think, well, we got a really good shot, we'll go for it. So to me, I would just like to see much clearer guidelines of what is required to at least put you in the running.
Yeah.
And and then if that could be followed up with some, I mean, Dirk made a fair point that it is difficult for Ripple X to give individual feedback to every project. We get that, yeah, and I am aware that hundreds of projects apply. Nevertheless, to just have an automated response to say you weren't successful and give zero feedback at all, it's a bit of a hard pill for anyone to swallow. And you know, I just feel like there must be some way whereby somebody could just put just a couple of paragraphs down to the end of the email just to sort of say, you know, why you weren't successful.
Well,
or
I mean,
is it worth you applying a second time? You know, if you've applied and they looked at it and they go, we would never support this in a million years, that is their right. It is their money. It's their program. They should be able to do with their money whatever they want. However, if they're going to allow people to apply a second, a third, a fourth time, and they've not got any chance of getting through, it only feels right that they should at least know that and know why.
I agree. I want to move on, but I'm going to make one point before we move on. This is a $1 billion or 1 billion XRP, whatever that is. Like that fluctuates, but this is a program that's lots and lots of money. Having the people to like, this is, and this, I'm in Agile, so this is feedback is key, right? But like, obviously the money's here. Having the money to give direct, you know, to fund a full-time employee or two to give that direct feedback or collect that, or put systems in place, and maybe it's just that little extra time in the system that they take to actually collect their thoughts so that feedback can be given. You know, that's a cost in itself, but obviously the money seems to be here to give in the first place. So why not give people the feedback so that they can either spend their time applying for a grant or spend their time, you know, actually building, which both would benefit the XRPL. So Julian,
again, what you say, JT, is 100% correct. You know, 1 billion XRP. Well, if it's 300 million or 800 million US, I don't know. Again, I think it's not only a Ripple XRPL problem. I think the whole grants thing on other chains possibly has here and there similar issues. But to engage a couple of people to really give feedback would benefit maybe the ledger more than spending more money on projects and not telling anybody else what to do, because otherwise Julian could possibly be wasting his time and his talent. Maybe he can, it's better that somebody says, Julian or Dirk, it's useless what you're doing. Start focus on something else, instead of saying, well, apply again and spend weeks of teamwork, thinking and creating decks and all kinds of stuff that is not our business. I presume that Chris has a bit of experience with that, but as a developer, I presume that he prefers to write code than to write white papers and decks. And the questions, it's a whole process, you know, and you want to scrutinize it and you want to do it well. Again, to the family and kid stuff, you're a little kid at school and you want to have A grades. Yeah. And you do spend time on getting there. And you get a C or an F and nobody tells you what you've done wrong.
Yeah.
But you can try again.
Yes. And I hear that. But part of this, again, I feel like we're veering into other areas as well. So Julian, you've connected a bit. I wanted to give you a second to finish your thoughts before we moved on to the node funding.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to step back on the feedback thing. For me, I fully understand that it's difficult to give feedback to all submissions. But on the other hand, for me, behind each submission could be a potential gem. So on one side, you have a huge program where you have, I don't know, 250 million US dollar. I would say take $1 million, spend it and create an audit team, hire them, pay them for that. And I think the whole community would be very happy with $1 million less, but a whole feedback system or a leaderboard where you can, after a submission, maybe see, what is the ranking, or those who fail it. I don't know. For me, it's really, if I think of all those projects who are working hard, yes, there is maybe not interesting projects, or maybe myself, I'm not enough interesting. But when I think of all that work, and I have to hear, oh, we have not enough time to give feedback to everyone. I'm like, how is that even possible? It's like not recognizing that maybe everyone is doing a lot of work. So for me, the message is really clear in some ways. We heard it a few times. There's a lot of submission. We are not able to handle that. For me, it's scary because we are in the end of a huge, I don't know, in a huge bear market, in a bull market. We had faced a lot of troubles and things, and for me, how would it be if tomorrow we have a huge hype in the crypto again, when we have hundreds projects arriving every day, 20,000 submissions? I don't know, it's an example. It would be even worse. So we are always talking about regulation, mass adoption and things. If we are not able to handle the actual rate of projects, which is pretty low, to be honest, we don't have every month 100 new, very interesting projects arriving on XRPL. My question is really, yes, it's difficult to answer to everyone, but there is few projects. It's also difficult to ignore them, like Expecta, for example. And that's for me things like, how can you ignore the actual projects who are right now running on the XRPL, doing things, engaging the community, spending money on nodes, on servers, on things. And instead of that, yes, maybe awarding projects that will never see the daylight. And that's really where my frustration rate started. Basically, when I talked about frustration, it was really like when I think of all those projects investing that time and them not taking the time to answer. And for me, this is a contradiction, because on one way you feel Ripple is not doing anything to help projects. They don't want us to succeed, I have the impression. And on the other side, there's the grant system, which is a clear message of, guys, build on XRPL. We want projects to come over. So it's for me a contradiction where I don't know how to place myself. I'm convinced, that's why I build it on the XRPL. But yes, it's kind of, I think we also this fact that maybe we are not the most sustainable project, but what do they look for? We are a project building tools, helping other projects to do their stuff. We are around for years. I think we not step in just to play around a few months. We engaged a lot of money. We are in a startup incubator with our local government. So at this point, I have more support from my own local government than even my blockchain or Ripple. And we always talk about regulations. And I'm like, yeah, my state is more advanced in terms of helping crypto startups than my own blockchain, honestly. Wow. And yes, this is the scary part for me, where I'm a bit like, yeah, I feel unworthy, and I could go with $1,000, but just the fact that we are supported by Ripple would be enough. And they don't even have to give us money, just to be acknowledged as a working company on the ledger. And
well, there is way more, by the way, JT, than the money thing. Huh? Again, we can argue about amounts, and if it's a lot or not a lot. In development, it's mostly not a lot. However, being mentioned by Ripple or RippleX in tweets or in other publications or press releases, being invited at events, being introduced to other people, only being able to say we got validation by them to other investors. That's, to me, is way more worth more than anything else that they could give me. Or as Chris says, they have to come and throw in millions. That would be very helpful. I won't even dare to ask for that. I said I would like a pat on the back, and people ridicule ridiculed it. Well, the pat on the back is the acknowledgement that Julian is
Yes,
speaking.
but you have to be able to get through the program to get that acknowledgement, which is what we're trying to get here today. So yeah.
Well, it's either you're in or you're out.
Well, exactly, but we're trying to figure out how can we get more clarity around those that get in and out. But speaking of building on the XRPL, this is also another common topic that, again, I want to make sure we address. And real quickly, this was brought up to me, I think, by Julian, and I think it's a great thing to discuss. I've discussed it in a few spaces as well. The fact that there's not as many, we talk about decentralization and the network, but there's actually not as many nodes as people might think. And, when it comes to mass adoption, is the XRPL really ready for mass adoption? And to those questions, for those that are view that, I guess I'll figure out in a second if you have nodes or if you're building nodes. Some of you've already kind of mentioned, but should that not be a part of the grant process, that if you're building on the network, adding to the network may or may not be a part of it? So I guess I'll start with Dirk for yourself on that question. Is Xspectre running nodes, and what do you think about that being part of this or not?
Well, very early on, we decided, and one of our advisors that time was Panos Mikras, who drew me to the XRPL, actually, and he was really keen on the fact, well, you have to do that. You have to show that you support the chain that you're building on. So initially, we had lots of other stuff going on. We made a donation to adopt a node from XRPL Labs, but shortly after, we decided to fire up our own nodes. We have 2 validator nodes. One of them is on the UNL list. I think there are only 35 on that list that have actual voting power regarding amendments. And then we have a full history node, and we chose to do it in not the most cost-efficient way, probably, but an easier solution for how we run the project. But it costs us about 40K a year.
Wow.
And there is no incentive. I don't need an incentive. I do that because I want to show that I am willing to invest not only in what we're doing and giving back to the community, but also supporting the chain that we're building on.
So about the grants, do you feel like because my question is twofold, right? Are you running nodes, which you've answered? And then do you feel like the grants should lean towards those that are actually building on the network for those nodes?
Well, I don't think there is necessarily some kind of correlation. We did it not because we thought it would help us get a grant. And it would be definitely helpful for people that are able or have the technical skills to do it. And having a node, by the way, isn't that complicated and isn't that expensive. Full history node is something different. It could incentivize people. It could be a condition for getting a grant. And it's, again, running a node isn't that complicated nor expensive. But it shows seriousness, I guess. And we were really happy. I think that we got on the UNL list and that nobody has gotten on the UNL list as quickly as we did. And I presume that had something to do with running the full history node as well. I don't know if we have to make a connection between the one and the other. There are lots of people that run nodes, or a couple of people that run nodes, and that get disappointed as well. And I don't think it's necessarily because of the getting money or not getting money. I think it relates back to all the rest, is interaction, communication, feedback, and so on.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that. Chris, you want to go next?
Yeah, well, the topic of nodes in particular is one I've spoken about many times on various spaces, and Dirk was on that call actually, and I do remember holding Xspectre out as an example of what all projects should do. I remember when they made their announcement about the full history node, and it's always been BPM's intention to run our own infrastructure. For one, we're going to need it when we scale, but at the moment we're still sort of like at the very early phase. So we've been testnet now for a long time, and we literally switched to mainnet like days ago. So it's on our roadmap to have a full suite of infrastructure. I've already made a start in what that's going to look like, but there are costs involved, and we have to be realistic. Right now, we don't really feel like we're going to put enough load on the network to require a full history. So we'll start small with our own submission nodes. We may look to try and run a validator at some point in the future, and then hopefully at some point, once we get recognition, find our way onto the UNL. We would have to be quite a long way down the road before it would make financial sense to us to support a full history node, but it's absolutely a goal. And I think it goes back to one of the fundamental points that we were having over who should run validators, validators in particular, but nodes in general. And it was Vet that was pointing out that essentially he's one of the people that runs a validator, and there are many others, and they run them really just to support the network. There's no financial incentive for them to actually run a validator, but it costs them real money. And when more projects build on the ledger and more load is put on, there is an actual real world cost that gets associated with that. And the reality is that we are at a point where somebody at some point is going to have to address this head on. Okay, we cannot have a network that is run by volunteers out of their own pocket and have projects coming in and essentially using it as free infrastructure, right? And then making money off the back of it. It's like saying that we found a backdoor into AWS and we can have as much hosting as we want and not pay for it. It's just not a viable solution. So what I've been saying for a long time now is when your project reaches the point where it is putting a load on the network, which is, significant enough, it should be running its own infrastructure. And when more projects start to actually launch like we've just done, and as they start to reach that point where they should be contributing, that's going to solve some of our problems automatically. I don't need a financial incentive to run my own infrastructure if I'm running it for my own business. That is my incentive, that I've got my own infrastructure to run it. That's what would motivate me to do it. So that, as one strand, combined with some other solution to the problem of why you would run a validator, is going to be ultimately the long-term solution for all of this. But
so, real quick, I just want to, for the viewers that are watching this, that may be laymen's that are listening, and for myself, because this is something that I'm fairly just openly very ignorant to as well when it comes to the hardware side of things. So when we say node, I've heard you throw out validator, node, and full history node. Can you just break down, just for everyone here, the costs and the differences between each, just very briefly, real quick, just so we can have a point of the conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, effectively, like just a typical submission node that you would just submit your transactions to. It's not particularly a particularly difficult thing for anyone with a technical background to set up. It's just a Linux box running RippleD, and a few appropriate configurations.
So how much does that cost? So how much does that cost?
I mean, of course, prices for hardware differ, and generally it's advised that you would use bare metal. So you wouldn't be looking really to do this in the cloud. You'd be looking at doing a bare metal server. So, for a Linux box that meets the minimum specification on the XRPL Foundation's website, you're going to be talking somewhere in the region of maybe £100 a month, something like that. So it's not a significant amount of money, okay? But you do have to have somebody in your team that's comfortable with the infrastructure side, that's got the Linux, particularly the Linux skills to actually do it, and also, to make sure that they keep the software up to date, that they don't just set one up and then do nothing with it, and then after a while it just gets blocked because they've not bought the latest amendments up. So that's one type. That's got nothing to do with being a validator. Okay. Then you're going to have the validators, which are doing a slightly different and more important job. And then, of course, you've got this unique group on the UNL. which effectively are the ones that are going to be sort of like voting in the amendments. And that's a really, really, really important job. And you shouldn't undertake that unless you're prepared to really commit to it. And in my opinion, that's where we've got some weakness in the current setup. We've got a current thing going on Twitter right now where there are validators that are extremely active that are trying to get amendments that need to go live, push live. And there were validators on the UNL that they're just dragging their feet. Now, when I say dragging their feet, I don't mean that there's an argument over whether we should put something live or not. They're not voting no. If they want to vote no, that is their right. And if you can't reach the 80+% that you need, fine. Okay. But they're just not voting full stop. And that is really frustrating if you are a validator that takes your job seriously. So there's work to be done around who is on the UNL and actually who gets to actually vote on these amendments. And then you go to a full history node, which is like the big daddy. Okay, so now you're talking about real serious infrastructure. You're talking about like disks that are really fast. And that's where the costs come in significantly. So you go from a couple of $100 a month and multiple man hours to going to something very different, where you're talking about needing almost data center level infrastructure. So real top quality stuff. It's not the sort of thing you're going to host in your garage at home. It's going to be in a data center somewhere. And you're going to need someone that really knows their stuff. And you're probably going to realistically want to fly over to the Netherlands to bring the disks back on the plane. Because to download a full history node right now would take over a year just to sync it. So I think the last I heard, I'm sure it was about 27 terabytes, or I think it's about 27 terabytes or there or thereabouts. And it's constantly growing. Not that that's a lot of space. 27 terabytes is not a lot of space.
It's a lot to me, but I don't know what y'all deal with.
Not for commercial infrastructure. But the point is, though, to download that over any kind of connection is just unrealistic. So I think you did that, didn't you, Dirk? Didn't you get Weetzer to provide you with some copies?
Yeah, again, with the help of XRPL Labs and Weetzer, who we we can all acknowledge that he's an XRP legend, and he's been very supportive, and he helped us out with actual physical disks. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare.
So we have the gosh, now I'm going blank what you just told me. I'm just trying to sum up. We have a node, not a node, what was the first one? Sorry.
We have, but you got like submission node, a node, a validator, which is kind of like a node which does governance, the validation, and then you got the next level up, which is just sort of like UNL, which is like what Vet does. He's a validator. And that's a really important role. And then you got the full history, and there are not many of those. I think there are probably only about 5 or 6 of those on all of the ledger. I think it's not
the XRPL Foundation has a couple. I presume Alloy and XRPL Labs, and I think that Daniel with Eminence from Casino Coin has a full history node as well. So there are only a couple of them.
Okay, so now that we know what these things are, and we've kind of understood where you two are going with it, I want to get to Julian as well. Julian, you've talked about building, and you're building on the XRPL. Do you have any nodes currently, and do you think this needs to be part of the grants conversation?
Yeah, we also have nodes, simple ones, and for sure one also to go on the validator way, UNL, and also all this, but from another perspective, we also need server resources, so that's why we build a data center. For me, it's not really related to the grant, but in some ways, yes, because if you are a small project and you straight need to build your own infrastructure, it's a huge cost. And right now, we had situations where little developers trying to create tools or things were directly blacklisted from XRPL cluster or any public infrastructure. So at some point, yes, the point comes, if you want just to start development properly, you directly need to have your own hardware or to engage costs. And for me, it's not directly related, but in some ways, it's also because for sure, if you get if I would get a grant right now, I would purely invest it in hardware. I would just spend it on servers, and this would really help us to go further. That's also what I said in the last submission, that a part of that would be simply to have hardware to make all this possible. And for me, it was also said by Dirk before, it should be even something that should be linked in the grant, because a project running some infrastructure is already a project contributing to the ledger. And in some ways, yes, not directly, but for many projects, it's a problem to develop their things in an early stage. So before you even have your company running a sustainable business, helping you to finance, for example, a full history node, I'm speaking about the step before. Do we have enough public infrastructure in the time before a company? You're not coming up in the first day and having a lot of money. So every tiny startup has to grow step by step. And if the first step is investing a lot in hardware, I don't know. That's, for me, it's, we have to find something real, and yes, public infrastructure should be there for developers to start something, and as soon they have their thing running, they should be able to pay their hardware. And for me, it's the situation with, for example, the trading boats. We want to go on another level. We want to make things way more on the server side, and for that we require more power. And if I look at the actual volume of sales, I mean, it's not even for the moment enough to finance a decent server. So that's the other thing on the XRPL. So you can do tools that are used by people that are interesting, but I would say that the blockchain itself, I mean, the community, the people, the market situation is right now also not enough for many projects to finance something. So even if you build something, I'm always thinking about tiny projects who think that if tomorrow they release their tool, they will get their liquidity, they will get enough money to take things. And I'm just realizing that's not true. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from the three of you, and some consistencies again, is that the nodes conversation is not a direct must for the grant program, but there is a tie to, and what are we incentivizing with the network? Are we incentivizing participation and true creation of the network and participation? Because we cannot pass amendments and we cannot make progress in a decentralized way if we don't have active participants, right? As well as the infrastructure that you all seem to need in order to create the products and truly create them. So it sounds like it's kind of a, we have many projects applying, but if there is more emphasis on quality than there is quantity, because if you give out a lot of little small grants, you can't really provide good quality grant to those who may need and are trying to really build, versus another topic, which I guess I'll go ahead and just address as we're addressing this one, is the fact that I have a list here of grant winners and all the different little things that, at least from my understanding, this is where they all come from. I believe, Julian, you helped provide the list. Am I right? So maybe you can tell me if, I'm hoping this is right, but from my understanding, this is a list of people that have done the grant programs and what they've been awarded. So at the time of the award. So that being said, this is a problem where, are these all the winners that what am I trying to say here?
Well, most of them, JT, I haven't even heard of them. And to me, Web3 is community, and community is people that are supporting the project and are interested. I'm trying to find names that I actually recognize.
Yeah, and some of this, some of these I recognize, most I don't. And trust me, I've been in the community a while. Probably around the same time of y'all. Maybe y'all been much more. I'm not sure, but the point is that if nodes is to be like just on the drawing back to nodes, because I kind of bridged two conversations. Bad, JT. But when it comes to the nodes conversation, who on these, you know, if you guys are the validators and the nodes, you know who is on this list and who is not holding on this list. And so if nodes need to be a part of this conversation, like, then how would this list have changed? And how would that have helped the conversation? Let me ask that.
I don't think that nodes should be a part of the grant process.
Okay.
Nodes, someone running their own infrastructure is validation of their intention to continue to build a real business on the XRPL. It's in your own interest to support the network that you're using. And that really is all the motivation that you should need to run your own infrastructure. Part of the problem with tying it to an actual grant application would be that there are many grants awarded, smaller amounts of money like 10,000, 30,000, 50,000. And quite often they go to supporting things like, I think in one of the recent awards, there was somebody given some money to create a Rust library. Now, that's fantastic. It's bringing an entry point for a whole group of new types of developer to come into the ledger with that. There would be no requirement for somebody that has built a Rust library to run their own infrastructure. They're effectively building a tool that other developers will piggyback off in the future, no requirement. So it would make no sense at all to make running your own infrastructure a requirement of the grant process at all. But I do think that a little section on there, and in particular, when we put our application forward, we made it quite clear that it is in our own roadmap to do that, to support the infrastructure as we grow as a company. And I think that those are the types of things that you would hope that they're looking to pick out from someone's application. You know, if you demonstrate that you intend to do something, and to be clear, even if you're awarded a $200,000 grant, going and spending a third of it on running a full history node would not be the wisest choice to make anyway. So, you know, I genuinely don't think that the node thing is part of the grant conversation. I think it's an important discussion for sure, and one that needs to be had, but I don't think it should be conflated with effectively the grant discussion that we're sort of having today.
I agree completely with Chris. I think that running it shows intention and probably brings use to your what you're building, that you can actually use the infrastructure that you have and support the network. I think it doesn't necessarily, it is not connected to the grants, and I think it shouldn't be connected to the grants. It's a validation of projects. You know, a project that invests in it shows at least some seriousness towards everybody else on the network.
Okay. Julian, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm following that idea. I think it should be just taken in account in a submission, and not a condition. But when you have a project like Chris said it, saying that they in the roadmap saying that they have as a goal to contribute with infrastructure, it should be taken in account. So, but yes, it can be a criteria of selection, because you have also a bunch of projects who wouldn't need this infrastructure for their project. So sure, but this list is interesting because, as Dirk said, there's so many names. I don't even know who they are. I never saw them, and it would be interesting to see who from those companies finally delivered a product, and to summarize the amount of money that was spent in projects that never saw the daylight.
Yeah.
And
I have to interrupt maybe, JT, and maybe you have to cut this out, but is this XRPL list? Because I see quite a few algo. I'm not really sure if it's XRPL grants, Algoverse, AlgoFame. I don't think it's the XRPL list.
Okay, well, I
Because
know
I'm
this
not
is. We can go back
recognizing
here. Like, that's fine.
any of them. That's would really be worrying, you know.
Okay, well,
Here it
maybe
is.
I was gonna say that was kind of a source that was provided. Again, I really appreciate you calling that out, And so I'm trying to like make sure of all that. And we'll keep this just like, hey, this is, but the problem is the same, right? And so whether we're looking at one list or the other, the point that we're trying to make here is that what is happening with the money? Is the money really being used to develop on the ledger, and are the grants going to people that deserve it? And so obviously we have one person that's been a winner and two people that are not here at this point in time, at least. So like people I have heard, and maybe you can tell me some others, but like even if I go to page 1 on here, like I don't know who many of the, besides BitHump, you know, I don't know who a lot of these people are. Maybe they could be failed projects. Maybe they could have had legitimate ties of, I mean, some of these don't even have a logo. So that makes me already question. But are people, I've heard stories, and maybe you can clarify, people just taking the money and running. And so if people can get all the way through a process and just take the money and be like, peace, and there's no follow-up, like, is that not a part of the problem as well?
No. So, I mean, I'll share a little bit then. So I heard, I mean, and I can only say these are just things I've heard, they're rumors. So this is not a matter of fact. This is just things I've been told, that in the very early waves, that did happen a couple of times. So people, they applied for a grant, they got given a grant, and then they use that money to do something that would be wholly inappropriate. That's going to happen when you start giving free money away.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you now that that's not how it worked in wave 4. So I can only assume that, you know, Ripple have had that feedback, they've taken it on board, and the process for being paid the grant is quite arduous. I mean, it's not just you've won your grant, here's your money, chaps, crack on. You know, we have to submit a full roadmap with milestones. We have to submit monthly reports stating what has been done in that month towards what milestone, and then they have to then sign that off, and you can only then invoice for it after which they've done. And you know, one of the more frustrating parts about the grant process, unless you're in the US, is that you get paid in XRP. Okay, so we get paid in XRP, and it didn't happen to us, but we do know of a couple of other projects whereby, you know, they've had their grant, they got sent their XRP, and then because of the difficulties of offboarding XRP into a fiat currency when you're a company. It's easy as an individual user, but as a company, it's much more difficult to do that. And I could speak from experience, it's not easy to do. But the price of XRP tanked for them, and the grant that they got was nowhere near what they thought they were going to get. Now, yeah. Ripple didn't do anything wrong. They paid what they promised to pay. But the fact that it took them like nearly a week to be able to offboard meant that their, I don't know how much it was, but let's say it was 100,000, was now worth 70. That's not helpful. And so I can say for a fact that the process still needs some refinement. Okay, but it's absolutely not a case that anybody can just apply for a grant, take 100 grand, and you know, go and buy a car, or you know, pay the mortgage off, or whatever they might want to, or at least not now. And my gut feeling is that those types of controls are going to get even more tighter as the grant process progresses. And I think that there will be criticisms to levy to RippleX on this program, and I think that's perfectly justifiable when something is not right. Constructive feedback is good, but also we have to be fair that this was a new process to them, the first time they've done it, and if they made some mistakes, then they've demonstrated that they've corrected those mistakes in further waves, and they're going through a learning curve like anybody else. So I don't see too much of a problem with that. And the other thing, of course, to bear in mind is that not every business that you set up is going to be successful. You know, it's not a guarantee that you just suddenly start a business and it's going to work. Yeah. Some people have great ideas and they still don't work. And it might be that you set up a business and you get given a grant for $50,000 and you spend your $50,000 and you've only delivered half what you thought you were going to, because development is not easy. Everything ends up taking longer than you always think it will. And if you ask for less than what you needed, or you only got given a portion of what you needed, and you run out of money, and you don't have any more to be able to lean on, then effectively that company's gone. And if you go through this list, which I did when we were putting the BPM event together, I went through the list looking for all the projects that were UK based that we could invite to come.
Yep.
There's a lot that aren't there anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that they did a runner. It just means that their project was a failure for whatever reason. So I'm always skeptical when to say that somebody's had the money, took the money and run. Doesn't, just because it failed doesn't mean they did anything wrong. But equally, they could have done. I don't know. The point I'm making is I just don't like jumping to accusations that just because a project has disappeared, that it was.
I think that Ripple did improve some things, and we had some discussions initially with my legal background about wave one people that indeed took the money and disappeared. A very valid point from Chris. A startup can easily fail. Also agree on that. And as what I now understand from Chris is that they actually did streamline the project and work with milestones and signing off and so on and so on. If you give a grant and if you say to somebody legally, this is what you get, 100, 200,000, there are no conditions, well, then you can't complain afterwards that somebody takes it and does something else with it. And I think that's something that Chris, again, is very right, that it's a learning curve. They started something new, which is a valuable asset for the community, and that they are learning and streamlining it. And that's a good thing to see.
Yep. And I'm just going through because even if that list is wrong, I do want to put the other list out there. And it's just good to, I'm seeing some consistency that I didn't see before in the other list. And so I forget who provided it to me, but it's hard to, it's hard to go and fact check all these different names. So I appreciate it. And I'm trying to make sure my source is right too. So I appreciate everyone's patience. I do see like Evernode and other different, what am I trying to say? Different projects popping up consistently. So it's good to see that people can win over and over again. And that's where the money's going. So again, just being fair. But again, these are things I've heard that I get to ask you as projects about what you have heard and what you've seen. And so again, that's the perspective I'm trying to make sure that we gather here. Now, it's good to see that Ripple or whoever is managing the grants is improving that over time. I'm all for continuous improvement. It's good to hear that that's actually happening because that's not necessarily the story I've heard in other spaces. So I just want to, it's good that y'all are helping to clarify that. That being said, this is about improvement. And so what do you feel in this area could be improved for the grant process to make sure that good projects are even more considered as opposed to the risk that we just discussed?
One of the important questions is, what is a good project? What is a good project to you, to me, to Chris, or to Ripple or RippleX? I have no idea. I have no idea. Is it breaking records in sales, drawing attention to the ledger, working with quality developers, delivering actual stuff, helping other people out, reaching hands and give exposure to other builders? We all tick all the boxes, but I don't know.
Yeah. Julian, you've been kind of quiet. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think really the thing I'm awaiting from Ripple is feedback. And that's really for me where is the major problem in all this. I would also, I think feedback, but also a leaderboard of projects is something that could help us. But for me, it's really just a feedback issue. I can go with a good explanation and understand why I didn't get it. That's completely fine for me. I'm not here saying I deserve a grant. That's absolutely not what I mean. It's I deserve an answer, a correct answer with all the work we have input on the ledger, with us wanting to go deeper with hardware, with infrastructure. I want just as a human a normal answer. For me, it's respect basically, and not feeling ignored. I think that's they could really take time to answer to the non-winners, and instead of sending out an automated email to all the losers, basically, they could take time and understand that there's people working hard, and it's about trust, because in that whole process, for me, I lost some trust in Ripple, and yeah,
And
for me.
I want to give a little bit of support to what Julian says, because I made the same mistake in wording it as he is doing now, and it got me the XRP army on my back saying, why do you sound frustrated? Why do you think you deserve it? And it's actually way more, but it's a representation of how somebody feels that puts his heart and effort into something. And it's very difficult not to sound like a frustrated, angry man, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's not the case. And the fact that we are all here from different angles and coming to a consensus, definitely, is very important for Ripple and for Ripple X, or for the community to know, and especially for the XRP army. Because one thing I've learned in the past weeks is that XRP holders do not necessarily care about the XRP ledger, nor about projects building on the XRP ledger.
Yeah. I think
That's
there's a
little bit
huge
of pity.
I think there's a huge sunk cost bias into sometimes that, not that Ripple isn't amazing. I do think that, there's many people in the space that have a great respect for, and Ripple is, I want to make them better, which is why I'm trying to help, appreciate y'all having this conversation. But there's again, with no transparency, you can't fix anything. So that's why we're here today. We've talked a bit about the money. It goes back to feedback for Julian, and I just want to say again that, like, sounds like such a simple thing, but if you're wanting to make sure the money is going to the right place, and even if we cannot decide right now what a good project is on the XRPL, as whatever that definition is that develops throughout the course of time, if Ripple is trying to figure that out and, to give grants to those people, how much more important, to Julian's point, is that feedback? Because if you don't know why you didn't get it, you cannot become whatever a better project is the next time you're applying for that grant. And so I just wanted to emphasize Julian's point there about the feedback. But we've got two other topics that we haven't covered necessarily yet, but we're kind of hit on. And I'll just kind of make this more of an open than trying to, I guess, individually address them. One is the Xumm blacklisting IP addresses as soon as any development requests are made using it, which causes infrastructure issues that y'all mentioned, and then the VC funding being tied to Ripple grants. And so I'm not sure how the Xumm blacklisting IPs affects the grants, but I'm willing to address both of these for the sake of time. And I know this has been a longer video, and I appreciate all of y'all's time, by the way.
I think Chris could probably give the best answer. I'm not a developer, and it's the first time that I have heard about it. I think it's something that newer projects struggle with, but that's the only input I can give on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this talking point came from. Certainly wasn't for me. The only when you say that XRPL Labs or Xumm are blacklisting projects, that blacklisting them as in the Xumm SDK usage, or blacklisting their XApps, or blacklisting their use of their infrastructure, because this is not something I'm particularly aware of.
Okay.
But you'd have to be clear over what it was you're saying that they've done, because I find it very difficult to believe that the XRPL Labs would do anything without some justification. So if they are blacklisting a project for something, then they've either done something wrong, or haven't done something they should have done. I mean, and blacklisting is not necessarily a bad thing. Blacklisting can protect the network. If someone is abusing infrastructure, that they should be blacklisted. The only one thing I am aware of that has happened is that with certain elements of the SDK, there are natural limits that are imposed at almost like at a software level for self-protection. And so one of the things that Wixay has said on a couple of occasions is if you are going live, then the project needs to let them know. Because what has happened is that a project has been tickling along, doing its tests and just having a soft launch, and then suddenly gone live. The volume's gone through the roof, but nobody ever adjusted any of the metrics at the back end to say this project needed to have more headroom. Okay. And when they did, XRPL Labs lifted the appropriate restrictions with the appropriate procedure. So I would be absolutely shocked and fall off my chair if what they did was anything other than just good practice. Unless someone can actually tell me what it is that you've said they've done, I would always take the view that they've acted in the best interest of the network above all. That would be my own view.
Okay. Well, my understanding is that this has happened. This all came up in our group chat and conversation and talking points. So it's all been in there on Twitter. And that's where I'm drawing these things from, is things that I've heard and that I'm trying to get answers for throughout the community. So I can definitely appreciate Chris's perspective. And I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt here. But at the same time, I do want to address the issues and raise things up so that, again, if there is something that we need to address, we can. But Dirk or Julian, do y'all remember who said this inside the chat, or do y'all have thoughts on this?
That's things that happened to me right now, actually, where I have at home strange things with my IP address when I'm connecting to public infrastructure. And it happened to other friends of me who are project leaders developing, for example, play-to-earn games. And they were also blacklisted. Their IP address were blacklisted from using public infrastructure. And it happened at a point where it wasn't for something where we had like many requests. It was really a low request frequency and got just blacklisted. Yes, for a few of them, after talking with Xumm, they were unlocked and things, but always they were said, create your own infrastructure. And so, yes, it happens. For me, for example, for no reason, because I'm not sending a lot of requests on the IP address. Maybe this needs another video. There's also things inside of Xumm between one token to another, where not everyone is at the same school, I would say. So I understand the point of Chris, which is fairly right. I think Xumm is doing most of those things to protect the infrastructure. But there were also moments it has gone public on Twitter and where it was in contradiction. If you go on the XRPL cluster website and you read the text, you really believe that this is made to support development and people wanting to test out things on the ledger. And as soon you have someone putting a little bit too much request or using it and not announcing it, basically, then his IP address is blacklisted. And it's even Witzewin said it on Twitter that it's for him difficult to blacklist those people who are connected through mobile network, basically, because they all share the same IP address. So there was days where on the public side we had basically Xumm saying, oh, don't overload our public infrastructure. We are gonna blacklist everyone doing that. But I think in that rush, there were people that got also their IP address blacklisted who didn't deserve it. Because for my example, if I switch my computer from home on mobile network, I can do everything. As soon as I'm going on my fixed line Wi-Fi, everything is locked, and I'm not doing requests from my local home computer. So it was like, just because I was once connected to tools we were creating, and at that moment we hadn't connected them on our own node. We were testing it on the public infrastructure, but really on a low frequency, one request every minute. It was like really something very low, but still. So, but I don't think, it's not really grant related.
Okay,
but
I was wondering what. Yeah, that was kind of my question: is what pressure does this put on the grant
but
thing?
For us, it had put push many of our friends and our projects under pressure to quickly have our own infrastructure, because I can technically right now not do anything on public infrastructure for my home. So I need my own nodes. I cannot do it without. And at some point, this is again a message for me where I'm like, on one side, you don't have a grant, you don't get an answer, you are like unworthy. On the other side, you are blacklisted from public infrastructure. How do you want to build? And you have to come up with a lot of money directly. And I'm lucky, I'm from Swiss, I have my company, but in some ways I invested a lot of money. And yes, I can also doubt at some point that if I'm doing that well. Wouldn't be it more sustainable on another blockchain where at least I would be recognized for what I do? So that's the point of, yes, in some ways you have situation where you are forced to get your own infrastructure, where you're blacklisted from Xumm, and when you're talking to them, they really say you do your own infrastructure. And that's, for me, I understand it. As soon you have a commercial activity, you cannot run your commercial activity on someone else's infrastructure. That's absolutely not right. But if you are testing something, developing something far before it goes to something commercial, we should be able to do that on our blockchain. And if we are not, it's simply a huge break to new developments and to people coming over, trying things. And it's like, I cannot really understand the message why we should directly burn the few steps from the beginning and directly start with infrastructure and money and things. So but it's not really grant related.
I think it's completely grant unrelated. I have to admit that we have hit some limits during our sales with API calls, but a simple message to XRPL Labs resolved that in a matter of minutes. So I don't have any experience with that. And again, Julian, what is important is that XRPL Labs isn't Ripple, and they're running a lot of infrastructure that they're paying for themselves. So I don't know if is it public, is it their responsibility? I'm not necessarily agreeing on all of this with you. However, I do get the frustration.
Yeah. So there's maybe some outside factors, I guess, is what I'm hearing, that might also put pressure on the grant program that might also need to might get raised. And maybe we don't know all of them right now. And if you know one, and if you're a viewer, if you've experienced something that maybe puts more pressure on the grant program that's not necessarily tied directly to it, put it in the comments below. Might have another conversation in the future. But yes, that was one. But again, the other topic was the VC funding that gets tied to those who get a Ripple grant. Have y'all experienced this? Is this something that you feel like is truly absolute, or is there like a spectrum, if you will, on this? And does Ripple need to understand that like that who they get also kind of chooses the VCs and who they're choosing? So
I don't think it's absolute, JT. I think it is, again, it relates to being in the club or not being in the club. If you are a grantee, you have higher chances to be able to go to Ripple Swell. You have higher chances to be a speaker at Apex, and you have higher chances to get in touch with VCs, especially before the SEC Ripple outcome temporary outcome. I think that lots of VCs were very careful, and there are quite a few VCs that are very Ripple minded and Ripple friendly. However, to get a foot in the door with them, they expect at least that acknowledgement from Ripple. And if not, it will be very, very difficult. And it's the same with a couple of other companies that are big companies that we all know, and getting exposure through them or being able to get on their platforms is very difficult, except if you are in some way tied to Ripple through a grant or something else.
Difficult for me to answer because I'm coming at it from the opposite end. I don't know what it would be like to try and apply to get conversations with VC, not being in the position of being a grantee. So therefore it's difficult to express an opinion, but I can certainly say that it's always received well. So, I mean, it's a validation of what Dirk says. You know, there's no doubt that being a grantee from Ripple does give you a certain tick in the box. I wouldn't think it's going to be the differentiating factor about whether or not you get funding or not, but I think it's certainly looked upon favourably. The only thing I will say is that as a grantee, you have to be extremely careful of how you phrase the support that you get from Ripple X. You cannot refer to it as support from Ripple. You cannot refer to it as being funded by Ripple. You cannot say you're backed by Ripple.
Okay.
There is a very clear legal distinction, I believe, between Ripple X and Ripple Labs, as in, you know, the Ripple we all know. And of course, that these are XRPL grants that are being awarded. Okay, the money may have originated from Ripple and Ripple X, and it may be Ripple X people involved, but you know, it is a xrplgrants.org that we're on.
Well,
So
everybody involved, Chris, in the procedure has a ripple.com email address.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not involved. What I'm saying is that, you know, even as a grantee, the one thing that we cannot do is go out and start touting that we are backed by Ripple. That I mean, again, I think this may have been another piece of learning that Ripple went through in the early parts of their phase, because when we had to have a whole onboarding session with Ripple in order to be given the grant. So after we'd won, every project had to go on a big onboarding session where we were made to listen to a big PowerPoint presentation about what we can and what we can't say. There were certain hashtags we cannot use. There were certain hashtags which we're encouraged to use. So they've got it together. You know, I think it may have come from earlier waves where people have gone out and used certain hashtags and said things that made Ripple uncomfortable, especially given the legal challenge that they were going through at the time. And so yeah, it's one of those very things you have to be really careful of. You know, it's great that you've got it. It's something you have to be very careful about how you present. We certainly did not use the words backed by Ripple anywhere in anything that we do, because ultimately it is an XRPL grant from Ripple X. It's a very important distinction that gets rammed home very, very, very early on in the process.
There are projects that actually, and we all probably know which one we're talking about, that actually say we're backed by Ripple.
Yeah,
and they are open and public that they say, well, what we have built has been paid by Ripple.
Yeah, well, that's certainly not our project. We've played by the rules, and I hope that, you know, that at some point in the future, if we do apply again, that will be taken into account. But we will roll the dice again, and from what one thing I do know is that just because you've won a grant once does not guarantee you will be successful on a second attempt. I do know of many projects that have actually had grants. They've built things and they've done a good job, and they applied, and to their dismay, they didn't get support. and it is strange that to think that RippleX would invest money in starting a project, and then after seeing it be successfully launched and delivering something of value, to then not continue to support it is almost a bit of a strange perspective to take, but it has happened. And again, it's something that we've discussed. We are absolutely we are not certain that if we apply again that we will win again. Even though we've now successfully delivered our real product, there's still a huge amount of work for us left to do, and we could absolutely do with more support, but there's no guarantee that we would get it even if we apply. So I just wanted to make that point. There's very clear distinctions need to be made. But to your point about the helping with the VC, it certainly, I think, will be a tick in the box. It'll certainly open doors, and there will be VCs that are naturally going to be more friendly to the fact that you have got support from a big company like Ripple. But I think that the what's more frustrating, I think, probably would be more around what Dirk was talking about with the incubators, where you're on almost like a bit of a roadmap for the accelerator program, and then you do get exposure in that way. That's not something that as a grantee that we've been exposed to. We've been given no access to any VC funding help at all.
Okay, I was going to ask you, but even though you've received the grant, you're the only one I can ask on this panel, so just maybe a simple yes or no, but did you see doors open after you got the grant as opposed to whenever you didn't have the grant? And do you feel like there's any correlation or relation at all?
Not really.
Not that you could tell.
We had already had many conversations with VCs prior.
Okay.
And they would all been very positive, but we were just too early to have those kinds of conversations. So as we've progressed through now, we will start to have those conversations again, but from a different standing now. So it certainly didn't make a whole lot of difference to us, but that just may have been that may have just been us.
Okay. That's fine. I just figured I'd ask, since you did get the grant, so there's kind of a before and after there. But again, like you said, it's timing. You're also just one project, so I just figured I'd ask.
Ask me again in 6 months, and then I'll give you a better answer.
Well, maybe we'll do a round 2 of this at some point. Maybe if the community finds this helpful. Julian, do you have anything to say about the whole VC funding deal and the grants program? Your experience?
Not particularly, but yes, my government, which has the startup incubator program, also asked it. Basically, we are also running investment program with them, and they also waited to know if we get awarded from Ripple or not. And for sure, it doesn't change anything with them because it's the startup incubator program. So even with or without, but again, yes, they said we will wait on that, and for sure, there was a bit of deception, if we can say that in English, when we didn't get it, and twice. So they will help us, but again, I also believe that it would have made everything more easier, and it's easier to convince, I would say, if you're the leading company of your blockchain is acknowledging you in some ways, and I think it's a first step where you can say, my blockchain acknowledged our project, and to go further. And I can also imagine that, yes, there's a lot of VCs that just ask about that first, and if they use that as a filter, basically, maybe already, which I can also understand, but that makes it even more important for some projects to have that grant, no matter how much that money is, but just to get that tap on the shoulder, basically.
Gotcha. And I appreciate that, and it's good to know that you have had that experience to a certain degree. Dirk, I mean, obviously you've talked about this a little bit before. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I agree with what Julian and Chris said. Again, it's not necessarily about the money; it's about the confirmation, not only from a personal perspective, but for anything else, marketing, investments. If you get support from the chain you are building on, well, that gives huge confidence to everybody involved on the team, community, and possible investors. So I think that's probably very, very important.
Okay. Now I do want to, this was not on the agenda necessarily, but I do think that and I can cut this part out if I need to, I guess, but y'all mentioned some things that, like, you've heard different projects ask questions. Well, if I did this, would I've gotten, and again, it all comes down to feedback, right? But what are some of the things that you feel like you've heard projects? I mean, because this may be good for Ripple and whoever's in charge of the grant program to understand. Like, people are asking questions. Well, what if I did X? You know, because y'all have received DMs, like you said, on either side concerning the grants program. So what kind of questions are people asking, and what are people identifying as things that they might or might not need to do that they're speculating about in order to be to get a successful grant through the XRPL labs? Like, what are some things you're hearing? Yeah, I hope that's a good question.
Well, there are some questions in the application form that to me are very questionable.
Okay.
And I think that however someone runs a program like this, they should look at the quality of the people, the quality of the project, and the quality of the community. And they shouldn't look at what color we have or what sex we are or where we come from. In most countries, asking these questions is illegal.
Okay. So have you had people reach out to say, hey, if I was X, would I have gotten it? Or if I was Y?
Well, I have nothing to lose, so I can speak up, of course. I apparently in Silicon Valley and in the tech industry, and probably not only in the tech industry, and I will definitely avoid going into politics, but there are some opinions that people should probably get stimulated or incentivized for reasons other than their building skills.
Okay.
And that's something that I think is shocking.
All right. Anyone else heard anything that no, Julian's like
Well, I mean, I had a number of projects reach out to me. Obviously, once we announced that we're successful, and it was a little bit of like, how did you manage it? What did we do wrong? And I'm like, well, I don't know. And so I mean, I had a call with one project where they said, well, can you give us some tips? So I said, well, go on then. I'll tell you my thoughts. So I gave them some fantastic advice, and they didn't win anyway. So I don't think I know. I don't think anybody knows. I think that's the whole point. I think that is partly the problem. As a winner, I couldn't tell you why we won. I know all I can say is that we put a lot of work into it. I mean, weeks of time went into the entire process. Outside of that, I can't tell you why we were successful. And I attempted to give my opinions on why I thought that might be to another project. Didn't really make any difference to them. So I genuinely think that there is a lack of clarity over what Ripple XR are actually looking for. It might be that they just don't know, and they don't know till they see it. It's one of those things where they just cast the net as wide as they can and get as many applications in as they can, and they sift through them and go with what they feel at the time. I personally, if I was doing the grant program, I would be having it more structured. I would be breaking it down so projects could identify areas where they were strong, and almost grade themselves before putting that amount of time in, because well, we put several weeks worth of work in, and myself and another one of our senior developers, you know, and he did a lot of the code, and it's time that we could have spent doing something else. And if we hadn't have been successful, you may take the view that that was time wasted. And, you know, couple of weeks worth of a couple of developers' time is not a small amount of money. So, you know, it is, it just feels right to me that a little bit more meat is put on the bones of what they're actually looking for, just so projects can assess whether or not they are advisable to go to the effort of applying. I don't think it's worth anybody applying if they're going to put like 10 minutes into the application. You've got to go all in to win. And so therefore, you've got to be prepared to put the time in and put a good application forward. But you deserve to know that you've got a fighting chance of winning if you're going to go to that level of effort. And the last thing I'd say is that when you've done all that and you've committed that amount of time to it, something more would seem fair, to be given a little bit more than just you were unsuccessful and we're not going to tell you why, you know, because I think it was Julian that said it. You could have an absolutely brilliant idea. You just might be in the wrong cohort. I mean, they do have themes, remember, Ripple do, for these grants. You know, technically anyone can apply at any one point, but there are specific themes to some of these grants. And it might be that you just have a brilliant idea, but you're just the wrong type of project for that particular cohort. And you might be completely put off from ever applying a second time. And then you might potentially have been successful. So just some element of feedback that just says, yeah, you got a good idea, but it's just not what we were looking for today. It's definitely worth you trying again. Or even as much as it's a bitter pill to swallow, we would never support your project because of X, Y, Z. At least you know you're not going to waste your time in the future. So I do think that if there's anything that Ripple X could do to improve, it would be just to do those people that have taken the time to do the application, do them the honor of giving them more than an automated email. Just even if it's a couple of paragraphs, that would be, to me, the minimum that I would like to see for everybody that does it.
Gotcha. Dirk, I saw you come off mute. Do you have something?
Well, JT, there was one person in particular that I want to address in this interview, and I won't name him, but he will know who it is because he has blocked me on Twitter. He's working at Ripple X. He's the one that did a Discord AMA with us and kept us on the line regarding the content and distribution of it. He was the one that told us, well, Neil will definitely be able to speak at Apex, and made me book tickets from Texas to Amsterdam for Bob, book hotels for Neil from London, book hotels. And he's the one that helped us out filling in the form to make sure that we were able to speak. He's the same one that told me in writing, well, you got denied in the accelerator program because you are too good, and in the next phase you will definitely be in, so reapply. And that all didn't happen. And that person is somebody that shouldn't be there.
Okay, so this is the just to distinguish. This is this is not Ripple program. This is the
Ripple
accelerator
X.
program.
Well, it's all Ripple X.
Okay.
And it's somebody, to my opinion, that isn't doing any good.
Okay.
And this is a personal thing.
Okay.
I have emails from senior Ripple members in San Francisco that say literally, what you're doing is amazing. We would be happy to support you. And they give me the same name of that person to help us out.
Okay, so there might also be, some resource issues, if you will, within that happens in every organization, right? But there could be a key person that is hurting the system, which is a possibility.
He doesn't like me, and I think by now he will have reasons to not like me.
Okay, well, I'm sure after this video he's probably, I'm sure you've already spoken to him to a degree, but yeah, well, I'm just saying that, like, to the productive side of things, like knowing who you're employing and know who you're putting these positions over the grants, and how they're communicating and how they're going about things is very key as well. So that being said, Julian, did you have anything on the topic of people saying things, or the speculation of, because there's no information, what people are speculating as to the reason they didn't get a grant?
No, I think we over flew most of things, and I think for me, what is important that came out was really that feedback issue.
Okay.
I was always sure that there's something weird ongoing. I won't tell the experience I had because it's a pretty weird experience, but basically it was also a certain person telling me to apply because that's basically what Ripple is looking for.
Okay.
So for me,
is
the
it the
word
same person?
I don't absolutely not know the person Dirk is talking about, and I think it's also better we don't use names. But for me, it's just simply pointing the fact that at some point there is maybe one or two people deciding all that shit, and in the end, that's for me the scary thing, as we don't absolutely not know who is taking decisions, who is that team, how many they are. And then you have stories like that. For me, it shouldn't be even possible to get an answer like, "Oh, you didn't get it this time because next time you will get it." That already proves to me that something is weird in the process behind. But anyways, for me, the important thing is that feedback, and I would love all the grant systems to put way more effort in that, and to acknowledge that they maybe made some harm with that, and there is maybe also already good projects that died simply because they didn't get VC, they didn't get grants and any support, and yeah. So for me, I think it's, for the sake of the whole XRPL, it's important to get more trust around that process. So I think it will also attract more projects if they know what about it is on the XRPL.
Yep.
Well,
And
there is a risk, JT, that good people will be leaving. And I'm not speaking about me or us, but there is that risk, and that risk entices that XRPL community members will become victims as well. So I'm very thankful that you did this interview. I'm very grateful that Chris is here as well.
yes.
Being a grantee, which is, in my eyes, very courageous.
Yeah.
I hope we can wake some people up, and I hope it changes things for the better. And if we are looking at all of it, I think it changes for the better, slowly. Hopefully, this can speed up things for new people that come onto the ledger and that want to build cool stuff.
Yep. I hope that this can be a conversation that they look back to and like, hey, this was the starting point of even more change. So that would be huge victory in my eyes to see improvements off of it. So I really do want to thank all of my guests here, Dirk, Chris, Julian, honorable mention to Duncan from Treasury, who wasn't able to make it, but was also who brought up some key talking points and some things in the background. Let us know what you think about this. If you're a new project and this has helped you, would love to hear that in the comments below. If you are somehow connected to this process and you found it valuable, or if you're just someone else in the market that this showed you the background of the frustrations and the issues that the projects that are trying to build are having, would love to hear your thoughts below, or just anything else that's on your mind. But I'm JTXRP, and this is Dirk, Chris, and Julian, and we're out.